Jason Clemmons, DC, on this beautiful Wednesday, December 20th, right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas, and on 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio and 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. And yes, it is a beautiful evening. I say that every single night that we get on the show because it is. It's a beautiful evening. All you guys are sitting here getting ready to listen to a fabulous hour of health and wellness, which tells me that most of you have already got your Christmas shopping done. So good for you. That's exciting for you. You're probably sitting at home getting ready to have supper and cutting just getting ready for a nice relaxing evening. Got your radio turned on, got your Facebook turned on, got your YouTube turned on, getting ready to listen to some health and wellness. So we're going to bring it to you tonight. We're going to bring it to you, and this is our book review night. I'm going to go over one of my favorite authors and personalities, really, at this point. Jordan B. Peterson, 12 Rules for Life is the book that we got for you tonight. So I think you're going to like it. It was very impactful in my life. So I hope everything's going good. Hey, just wanted to just recap just real quickly the last two nights. We took health to church on Sunday, talked about the book of Micah, talked about making sure that we don't put off what we can do today to try to be healthy today, because that stuff catches up to us over a period of time. And then last night we had kind of a personal night and talked about just a thought that I had about how it works, and when you finally realize that you've messed up, you've gone for so long and you've made some mistakes, that when you get ready to correct those mistakes, sometimes it takes a while. You got to be patient. You got to let time run, and you got to understand that some of those mistakes that we've made along the way, we can't undo. We're going to have to deal with them. But still, our best option is to deal with them. The best option is to set ourselves on the right path. And Dr. Peterson was one of the people that pointed that out to me here just recently in the last few years. I don't know if you guys know much about Dr. Peterson, you guys that are listening to my show, but he's a clinical psychologist. He was from the University of Toronto. He spent time. He's from Canada, and he spent time at Harvard, and he's done a lot of interesting things in his life. But he decided that he would just start putting his lectures online and see what would happen. And he was just lecturing right there from his classroom at the University of Toronto, and he put hours and hours and hours of video out there for the whole world to see. And then he got super popular. But I'll get into him a little bit more of that in just a second. But he's the one that I started learning from, and I heard him say one time, he's like, and I've mentioned it on the show, he's like, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly the way he said it, but something to the effect of, a person should think about the absolute best thing that they can do in their life, and then they should set their days up to accomplish that one thing. And he's like, everything else that you have to do is really secondary to that. There's nothing better you can do than to do that. And if you really think about it, why would you want to do anything better than what you can do? And I thought about it, and I thought, hey, that sounded logical to me. That sounded pretty logical to me. What if I just thought about the absolute best thing I could do on a daily basis, and then set my entire world up to accomplish that? What he presented is the idea that, hey, that's me picking up my cross and walking up the hill. There's nothing better I can do on a daily basis. And so I really, really appreciate Dr. Peterson. And he's world famous at this point. He got super famous over some legislation that was being passed in Canada. And it just happened to have the transgender take on it. But it was about compelled speech. And he took a stand. He took a stand about compelled speech. It didn't have anything to do with the transgender people. It had to do with the government telling him what he can and he cannot say. And man, when it hit the social media airwaves and YouTube and Twitter and all the places, it just became ridiculously out of control. And I've had lots of famous people tell me this. I even read it in in President Trump's book one time, probably 15 years ago, um, or longer. But I used to have it written on my board, and it goes completely against my own personality. But what was written on my board is um, if you don't tell people how great you are, they may never know. And it's not it's not a very humbling sentence that I got from President Trump's book. It was way before he was president, but it was kind of, it's not really my personality to do that. But I have had lots of people I've listened to that were famous people say you got to get attention, you got to get people's attention, and then you got to get haters. And that's part of what I'm doing with this show, is working on haters, because I'm sure that we've got plenty of them that have listened to the show that are getting that way. But Dr. Peterson got super famous from his haters, and it didn't have anything to do with that. His stance was simply, you as a government cannot tell me what I have to say. Never been done in the history of mankind, and he wasn't going to stand for it. And he was willing to put his whole entire career and his life on the line. He would go to jail, and if they put him in jail, he would starve himself to death. Like, he was willing to put himself on the line for something. He felt that strongly about it, and that's what. And so I don't know exactly where I got introduced to Dr. Peterson, but I got to somewhere along the way. I heard of him, and then I've listened to I don't know, hundreds of hours of him speaking and lecturing and teaching, and he wrote a book called Maps of Meaning. And this is the hardest book I've ever tried to read. It's just very difficult to read. And if you want to try this one on, good luck to you. And I hope you can handle it. But it's dense. He mentioned one time that he wrote every sentence in his book 50 times. And what he said was, I don't know that I wrote the best sentence that could be written, but I can't write it any better. And so it's pretty dense. It's very, very deep in its thought, and that's one thing I love about him. I think that's one thing that he's loved around the world about is his really deep thoughts. How he breaks things down, how he maps them all out. And so I'm still working on this book. And then this one led me to my favorite book, The Master and His Emissary, and so The Master and His Emissary took a lot of this same stuff, but made it a little bit easier to understand. And then Dr. Peterson and Ian McGilchrist got together and did a podcast that you can watch on YouTube. And you talk about fabulous now. Those two guys together had both books sitting right there, got to sit and listen to both of them. And it's just some really, I love deep thinking. One of my ladies that actually listens to this show, I hope you're doing well tonight. She mentioned to me that, that we get into some critical thinking on this show. We get into some deep thoughts, and that's what it's about. Because I know some of you want some critical thinking and some deep thoughts. That's what I learned from Dr. Peterson. They do these long things. Like last night, we talked about Dr. Lustig on Huberman Lab podcast, and that's a 3-hour podcast. That whole thing was 3 hours long, and 3 hours and 29 minutes was the length of that podcast. And in today's quick society where everybody just wants a soundbite and everybody wants a 15-second reel, and they want something really quick and move on to the next thing, that's not really what deep thinkers like to do. It's not really what we're all about. And if you're sticking with me on this show, I think you believe that too. I think you'd rather have some substance for your time. That's what I'm trying to bring. I hope I get better at it as I go along. But Dr. Peterson, then after he wrote the Maps of Meaning, he came out with this book called 12 Rules for Life. And it was a little bit better. It was it was better written for it wasn't as intense a book, and it's way easier to read and it's way easier to follow. It's got a lot of the same stuff from Maps of Meaning in it, but it's way easier to follow. And so I thought we would break it down tonight. That's part of our review. And so let's get started with it and talk about it. Jordan Peterson has taught mythology to lawyers, doctors, and business people, consulted for the UN Secretary General, helped his clinical clients manage depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, and schizophrenia, served as an advisor to senior partners of major law firms, and lectured extensively in North America and Europe. With his students and colleagues at Harvard and the University of Toronto, Dr. Peterson has published more than 100 scientific papers transforming the modern understanding of personality. While his now classic book, Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, revolutionized the psychology of religion, he lives in Toronto. So, this is a 2018 copyright book. And let me be clear. There, I don't know if other people would believe this, but he's one of the most humble people that I've ever known. Like, he literally cares about humanity. Like, he cares about humanity to the depth that he would dedicate his life to humanity. Like, there is no possible way that a person that has this much understanding and knowledge has not dedicated himself to reading and studying and learning and working through situations and going through all kinds of situations. So what he's saying with 12 rules for life, he is not demanding it. He's not a dictator saying this is the way you should live by any means whatsoever. He's simply taking his knowledge and sharing it with us and offering it to each one of us to make our lives better. That's all it is. You can take it or leave it. It's not some sort of. This is not a Bible. This is not. This is not the end all be all of all things. So, please, when we go through it, um, that's not by any means the way that he presents it. But so we're going to go through each one of these. We're going to try to get through all 12 of them tonight, and just at least give you enough information that if you want to read the book, if you want to get the book on audio tape and listen to it, if you want to spend some time on YouTube and listen to Dr. Peterson, he's gotten into all kinds of stuff now, and he's making some money in because of his fame and all that sort of thing. So he's gotten political, and he's involved with some political guys and all that sort of thing. But it doesn't discredit, in my opinion, all of the things that he has to teach. And he lectures around the world, and he's really fantastic. So, rule number 1: stand up straight with your shoulders back. Yeah, straighten yourself up. Represent yourself, right? And he talks about lobsters and territory. And this is one of the things that people just get all freaked out about, right? They misinterpret so many things about what he says. But if you are like most people, you don't often think about lobsters unless you're eating one. However, these interesting and delicious crustaceans are very much worth considering. Their nervous systems are comparatively simple, with large, easily observable neurons, the magic cells of the brain. Because of this, scientists have been able to map the neural circuitry of lobsters very accurately. This has helped us understand the structure and function of the brain and behavior of more complex animals, including human beings. Lobsters have more in common with you than you might think, particularly when you are feeling crabby. Ha ha. Yeah, he's not all that funny, but that was kind of a joke there. Lobsters live on the ocean floor. They need a home base down there, a range within which they hunt for prey and scavenge around for stray edible bits and pieces of whatever rains down on them, continual chaos of carnage and death from above. They want somewhere secure where the hunting and gathering is good. They want a home. This can present a problem since there are many lobsters. What if two of them occupy the same territory at the bottom of the ocean at the same time and they want to live there? What if there are hundreds of lobsters all trying to make a living and raise a family in the same crowded patch of sand and refuge? Other crustaceans have the same problem too. When songbirds come north in the spring, for example, other creatures have the same problem. They engage in ferocious territorial disputes. The song they sing, so peaceful and beautiful to human ears, are siren calls and cries of domination. A brilliantly musical bird is a small warrior proclaiming his sovereignty. Take the wren, for example, a small, feisty insect eating songbirds common in North America. A newly arrived wren wants a sheltered place to build a nest away from the wind and rain. He wants it close to food and attractive to potential mates. He also wants to uh, con- convince competitors for that space to keep their distance. So one of the things that he's pointing out, and he really, from a neurology standpoint and a neural circuitry standpoint, is how we actually get serotonin and dopamine and the way that we can present ourselves in the world. And he talks about in this chapter, he talks about how the animals themselves will present themselves to defend themselves. And and here and a little bit further down, he says, over the millennia, animals who must cohabitate with others in the same territories have a consequence learned many tricks to establish dominance while risking the least amount of possible damage. A defeated wolf, for example, will roll over on its back, exposing its throat to the victor, who will not then desire to tear it out. The now dominant wolf may still require a future hunting partner. After all, even one as pathetic as his now defeated foe. Bearded dragons, remarkable social lizards, wave their front legs peacefully at one another to indicate their wish for continued social harmony. Dolphins produce special sounds pulse while hunting during other times and excitement to reduce potential conflict among dominant and subordinate groups members. Such behavior is endemic in the community of living things. You got to get along with folks, and you got to be able to present yourself in a way that makes you formidable in your world. And his idea of chapter one is it's really important to stand up and represent yourself. Stand up with your shoulders tall. Bring yourself forward into the world and establish yourself in the world. And I think that's really good for our health because it we kind of shrink sometimes. We will shrink and fall into I'm not a very conflict oriented guy. I really hate conflict. Um, and I've had to force myself over the years to to at least kind of stand up for myself a little bit when I believe things are right. Now, I don't go looking for a fight or anything, but it's important to establish your presence in a relationship, but also understand that it takes cooperation with other people to be able to withstand long terms. The true leaders are the ones who can get along with people and not run them down. That's what's wrong with our politics today. That's what's wrong with President Trump and Biden and all the rest of them is they don't they they have to fight in a certain way to get elected, but then they don't have any ability to bring it back together and pull our country back together. Right? They just want to dominate and dominate and dominate, but they're not considering the long term gain. You got to be able to get along with each other, and that's what basically chapter one is all about. And it says basically to say, set your shoulders straight, stand up straight, and represent yourself in your world. Chapter two, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Imagine that 100 people are prescribed a drug, and this is not our style, right? This is not what we like. But consider what happens next. One third of them won't fill the prescription. Half of the remaining 67 will fill it, but won't take the medication correctly. They miss doses. They quit taking it early. They might not even take it at all. Yeah, some of us won't even fill it, right? Okay, but let's get to his point. Physicians and pharmacists tend to blame such patients for their non-compliance, inaction, and error. You can lead a horse to water, they reason. Psychologists tend to take a dim view of such judgments. We are trained to assume that the failure of the patient to follow professional advice is the fault of the practitioner, not the patient. We believe the healthcare provider has a responsibility to proffer advice that will be followed, offer interventions that will be respected, plan with the patient or client until the desired result is achieved, and follow up to ensure that everything is going correctly. This is just one of the many things that make the psychologist so wonderful. Yeah. Of course, it sounds like a chiropractor. Of course, we have the luxury of time with our clients, unlike other beleaguered professionals who wonder why sick people won't take their medication. What's wrong with them? Why don't they get better or want to get better? Here's something worse. Imagine that someone receives an organ transplant. Imagine it's a kidney. A transplant typically occurs only after long periods of anxious waiting or on the part of the recipient. Only a minority of people donate organs when they die, and even fewer when they are still alive. Only a small number of donated organs are a good match for a hopeful recipient. This means that the typical kidney transplantee has been undergoing dialysis, the only alternative, for years. Dialysis involves passing all the patient's blood out of his or her own body through a machine and then back in. It's not pleasant. It must happen 5 to 7 times a week for 8 hours at a time. It should happen every time the patient sleeps. That's too much. No one wants that. Now, one of the complications with transplant is rejection. Your body does not like it when parts of somebody else's body is stitched into it. Your immune system will attack and destroy such foreign elements. To stop this from happening, you must take anti-rejection drugs, which weakens the immune system, increasing your susceptibility to infection. Most people are happy to accept the trade-off. Recipients of transplants still suffer the effect of organ rejection despite existence and utility of these drugs. It's not because the drugs fail, it's more often because those prescribed the drugs do not take them. How interesting is that, right? Like they won't do what they're supposed to do because it, it's part of the reason they got in that situation in the first place. But there's a certain number of people that will get an organ transplant and they won't do the things that they're supposed to do, and they won't treat themselves like someone that they are responsible for helping. So if you think about that, and what he's trying to say in this chapter is basically that it's pretty self-evident that if you switched the roles and you were trying to talk to someone else who was going through the exact same problem that you're having, then what would you do what recommendations would you make for them if they were going through the exact same problem that you were having? And what he basically gets to in chapter 2, and I'm just trying to cover some of this information so you get a little bit of it, but what he gets in chapter 2 is that, hey, look, what if you treated yourself that way? What if you thought of yourself, if you were going to actually write a prescription for yourself, or you're going to write out a goal setting thing for yourself, and you were going to say it to someone else, what would you do? And so his advice there is to treat yourself the way you would treat someone else that you were responsible for. That's a good rule of thumb right there. I'm just kind of moving through because I know we got 12 of these rules, and it's going to be hard to get through all of them in the show. But I just wanted to give you a little preview of that right there. Rule number 3: make friends with people who want the best for you. Make friends with people who want the best for you. One of the things that he told me was you got to be careful who you tell good news to, because the people that want the best for you, they will embrace the good news and they'll be happy for you and they'll want to support you. But the people that don't want the best for you, they don't really like your good news. They're really irritated by it. And that's kind of the gist of this chapter right here. I grew up in the town I grew up in had been scraped only 50 years earlier out of the endless flat northern prairie. Fairview, Alberta was part of the frontier that had cowboy bars to prove it. The Hudson Bay Company department store on Main Street still bought beaver, wolf, and coyote furs directly from the local trappers. 3,000 people lived there, 400 miles away from the nearest city. That's kind of what we talked about in the um, on Monday when we talked about Bethlehem, right? He came from a little bitty place, Fairview, Alberta, Canada. Like he's one of the most famous people, um, lecturers, YouTube people, doctors, teachers in the world today. And he came from that place right there. And in chapter 3, he just discusses the idea that you want to make friends with those people. You want to make sure that you can get away from those people who don't want the best for you. And sometimes you have to move, and sometimes you have to break relationships. But if you really want to achieve what you set out to achieve, you got to make sure that those people that you surround yourself with, they want the good things for you. And sometimes that's hard to do because sometimes what he gets into right there is, man, they might be lifelong friends that you've had. You might have had them forever. You've had gone to school with them, grew up with them, but they really don't. They're not really interested in what's best for you. We're going to take a break. We will be right back right after these messages. Um, he said, the world is a different place when it's cold like that. The drunks in our town ended their sad lives early. They passed out in snowbanks at 3 in the morning and froze to death. You don't go outside casually when it's 40 below. On first breath, the arid desert air constricts your lungs, ice forms on your eyelashes, and they stick together. Long hair, wet from the shower, freezes solid and then stands on end. He grew up in a rough place, and that's he goes through this chapter and he talks about how rough that town was and how hard it was to grow up in that town and really have to be tough. And he was kind of a small guy, and he was quite a smart aleck. And so his smart mouth got him in lots of trouble when he was growing up, and he had to learn to get along with people, and it was tough. It was tough. It was a tough life to grow up in. It taught him a lot of stuff. It taught him things like being able to speak up and stand his ground and do the things that it takes to be the man he is today from some of that rough stuff. But one of the things that he says in chapter 3 is that he had to, when he finally got married, moved to the city, was going to the university, he had to change the group that he was with. He could no longer hang around some of the same people that he had hung around with in the past. And he presents that idea to us too, that um, be careful about who you if you want to achieve your goals, you're going to have to find some people around you that are trying to achieve goals. I see that same thing in chiropractic all the time. It's really hard. That was one of the disappointing things for me in chiropractic was during my coaching life before chiropractic, football coaches talk about football all the time. Like we go out to dinner, we talk about football. We go have a drink, we talk about football. We go fishing, we talk about football. Like at least it was in my life that way. Like we were watching football, we were talking about football, we were everywhere. How many napkins and pens we've all football coaches have broken down over the years. They they would that was that way. And when I got into chiropractic, it was really hard it, for because chiropractors typically are not like that. It was super surprising to me. They talked about cars and hunting and real estate, all kinds of stuff. And I was like, why aren't y'all talking about chiropractic? Hey, everybody, we're back on the show. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, and we are breaking down Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life tonight. Just giving you kind of a skim over the top of each one of the rules so that you can kind of get a better idea of it. And we just got finished with um, the rule number 3, that make friends with people who want the best for you. And we were talking about that there comes a time where you got to be careful about who you tell good news to. You got to be careful about who you surround yourself with. Some people are not interested in your advancing your life. Some people are not interested in you being healthy. From a health standpoint, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal because some people are not interested in health. Some people are the majority of people are not interested in health. Now, the majority of people that are listening to this show absolutely are interested in health. And you know what it's like. You know what it's like that, hey, look, I can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. I can't keep putting myself with this same group of people that are just going to eat a bunch of crap, drink a bunch of crap, and then put me in these situations that is not good for me, right? So we know what that's like. Chapter 3 is a good chapter. It really does break down some things there that are we all pretty much know, but it's nice to have it written out for us. And he gets super deep in all these chapters, but we've got 12 of them, and so I'm just trying to get through all of them. So rule number 4: compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And this is a really good chapter. If you want to advance yourself in on a daily basis, you're trying to be better than the person that you were yesterday. And one of the one of the tough things for us, especially when we're younger, is we're trying to look and see, we're keeping up with the Joneses. We're trying to figure what someone else did. And it's fair to that for that happens to younger people. So if you're in your 20s or in your 30s and you're trying to keep up with someone else, or you're seeing someone on social media that you're trying, I guarantee the kids today, they're doing this like crazy, trying to keep up with some influencer who's on YouTube. And it's so unrealistic. It's so unrealistic to do that because it'll trap you. It'll get you trapped. And everybody who's been around for a while, they totally understand that compare yourself to who you were yesterday. And that's why one of the things that we've been saying for the last several months is, look, today is the best day to make a choice to be healthy. There's no reason to wait till tomorrow to be healthy. There's no reason to wait till the first of the year. There's no reason to wait till Monday. Do it today. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to be better than the person you were yesterday. That's that moving forward mentality. That's that keeping your eyes forward. That's that mentality that what I've done is I've set myself on a path that I think is the best thing that I can do. And then try to spend my day every single day accomplishing that. And that gets really tricky. It's sometimes hard to do. I'm going to share a kind of a conversation that I had today with one of my ladies who lost her husband. And she lost her husband a while back. And she came in and she was telling me that she hurt herself today because she was picking up a bunch of glass bottles. And when she leaned over to pick up, I guess, a carton or whatever she had those glass bottles in, she kind of strained her back a little bit. And she was concerned that she had hurt herself. And my thought was, what are you buying with glass bottles? And my first thought was, she's buying soda. And because that's what I was wondering, and maybe that's because we used to have glass bottles in soda when I was a kid, and you could recycle those bottles, and that's what she was trying to do, is recycle some of that glass. And she said wine. She said it's mostly wine. And I said, well, how much of that wine are you drinking? And she said, about 2 glasses a night. But I water it down and I have it over ice, and I always drink 2 glasses of ice water with it. But she said, you should have seen me. You should have seen me when my husband died, because pretty much right after he died, it was a bottle a night. It was a bottle of wine every night to deal with the loss of her husband. And the the one thing that is really hard to do is to stay on track every single day and try to be better than you were yesterday, because there's a few things that can set you off, and there's a few things that frustrate you. You can have one or two or three things that frustrate you, really, that really are irritating, and it's amazing how quickly you'll just give up everything. Like when it gets really hard and you get really um, irritated with something. And it could be simple stuff. It could be something that your spouse said to you. It could be something that is going on with your kids. It could be something that could going on with your boss at work. It can be um, the time of year. Maybe you don't have enough money to buy a Christmas present that you want to buy, or you can't figure out how you're going to get through the end of the year, or you can't figure out how you're going to deal with somebody at work, and you can get frustrated, and it won't take but just one or two of those things to get on your brain, and you'll lose a little bit of sleep, and then all of a sudden you will just quit caring about anything and just turn it over to wine and chocolate and pornography and whatever the thing is, right? You'll just, it's like, screw it. I don't care. I don't care anything about it, right? That is the thing that I'm talking about. That is truly the why I always think that your why has to be the biggest thing, because because of when you're going to give up on it. And that's it's kind of this idea of compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is. Don't compare yourself to somebody else. Try to be the best you that you can be. Now, it doesn't mean by any means that you can't learn from someone else, but you really do. Um, you will serve yourself better if you try to make yourself better every day. And I had a lady just this afternoon. She asked me, "What can you do to help me with my sugar?" And I was like, I don't really, I didn't really understand the question at first. She's like, what can you do to help me with my sugar? And my answer was, why do you want to stop sugar? What is your why? What difference does it make? If you do not have something that's big enough, she said, well, I just want to be healthier. And I just don't think that's it. I do not think that's big enough. I don't think that is a big enough why to be able to handle those things that will come up against you. It's you're to make the decision that you want to be better than you were yesterday is a big deal. Now we get it, right? He's trying to say not to compare yourself to someone else, but just so you're not getting all confused, you're the only one that lives your life. You're the only one that can bring to the table you. You are the unique you individual. There's no other you that's ever lived on the planet ever. You are the only one representing you in this time and space, period. And if we wanted to get a picture of the entire human existence, if we wanted to see all of what life has to offer, we need you, because without you, we got a little spot missing in the picture. And you're just as important. You are important. Doesn't matter what someone else is doing or how much money they make or how good looking they are or whatever their thing is, right? It's you are important. So let's get on to the next rule. Rule 5. Don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. So, for all you parents out there, this is a big deal. And he gets a lot of flack for this rule right here, and people get all fussy about it. But don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Your children are going to have to function in society. And if you don't like them and you're the one that loves them, then there's a really big chance that there's going to be other people that come along that don't like them either. So you you might want to try to correct your child when they're doing things that are going to make them unpopular or unsocial with other people. Not maybe not unpopular, but unsocial for sure. You got to be able to get your kids to to get along. He starts it out. It says, recently, I watched a 3-year-old boy trail his mother and father slowly through a crowded airport. He was screaming violently at 5-second intervals. And more important, he was doing it voluntarily. He wasn't at the end of his tether. As a parent, I could tell from the tone. He was irritating his parents and hundreds of other people to gain attention. Maybe that he needed something, but that was no way to get it, and his parents should have let him know that. You might object that perhaps they were worn out and jet lagged after a long trip, but 30 seconds of directed problem solving would have brought that shameful episode to a halt. More thoughtful parents would not have let someone they truly cared for become an object of a crowd's contempt. Yeah. Chapter 5, teach your kids how to behave. Make sure that they understand how to behave, and make sure you understand how to behave in society. So, chapter 6, rule number 6, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. There's a lot that goes on in doctoring. They tell us that. I've heard that lots of times as a doctor. They say, how can you tell someone how to live a healthy life when you're not living it yourself? And there might be a bonus of meat on it right there, because it it is difficult to do that. And he's talking about, before you decide to tell the government how to run the state, maybe you should take care of your own house. Maybe you should put yourself in order first before you move along. And sometimes, and what he will get to in this is he'll get to, and he'll get to the doing the things that you would do if you could do them. What would you do? And one of the things he talked about was making your bed. Take your environment that's around you and make your environment, straighten it up. Straighten up yourself first and do it from the arm's reach of where you are. Take your environment and make your environment more orderly, and then see if you can move a step out and make your make your entire room more orderly. And then step out again and see if you can make your entire house more orderly as you move along right there. I'm having a camera problem again. I apologize. You're going to have to there it goes. But before you start to criticize, because we do that a lot now, especially with social media, it's so easy to criticize everyone else before we handle our own problems inside our own space. And that, so set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. And that's rule number 6. Rule number 7, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. And he again goes into that list. Life is suffering. That's clear. There's no more basic, irrefutable truth. It's basically what God tells Adam and Eve immediately before he kicks them out of paradise. What in the world should be done about this? The simplest, most obvious, and most direct answer: pursue pleasure. Follow your impulses. Live for the moment. Do what's expedient. Lie, cheat, steal, deceive, manipulate, but don't get caught. In an ultimate meaningless universe, what possible difference could it make? And this by no means a new idea. The fact that life's tragedy and the suffering that is part of it has been used to justify the pursuit of immediate selfish gratification for a long time. right? We do that in health a lot. We immediately in health we will as soon as it gets tough, we're just like, to heck with it. Just throw it all in the trash and just go get a Snickers, right? And what he will point out that the pleasure of expediency may be fleeting, but it's pleasure nonetheless, and that's something to stack up against the terror and pain of existence. Every man for himself, and the devil take the hindmost, as the old proverb has it. Or is there an alternative, more powerful and more compelling? Our ancestors worked through very sophisticated answers to such questions, but we still don't understand them very well. This is because they are in large part still implicit, manifest primarily in ritual and myth, and as of yet incompletely articulated. We act them out and represent them in stories, but we're not yet wise enough to formulate them explicitly. We're still chimps in a troop or a wolf in a pack. We know how to behave. We know who's who and why. We've learned that through experience. Our knowledge has been shaped by our interactions with others. We've established predictable routines and patterns in behavior, but we don't really understand them. It's really cool how he does it. One of the things that he breaks down is Pinocchio. One of the things I've learned from Dr. Peterson is understanding Pinocchio. He breaks down Disney movies, and not the political part of Disney movies, but back before they got crazy. He breaks down those things, and he shows how there are certain themes that go along with the a blockbuster hit. Same thing with um, J.K. Rowling, whatever that book is, that famous book that sold 500 gazillion copies. Harry Potter. Yeah, Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling. Same theme as Pinocchio. And one thing that Dr. Peterson does such a great job of is he explains why those things make sense to our brain. He really has shown me, like, look, the reason that we fall for that. It's if my mom and dad are watching, they'll love this. But the my dad started watching a bunch of Hallmark movies, and so the other night I went over there and I was just going to stay for a few minutes, and they had a Hallmark movie on, some Christmas movie, and the girl had an accident and had amnesia, and she was used to be in love with one guy, but then she left, and then she didn't know why, and then now she's engaged to another guy, but she doesn't really know why she's engaged to him. And so the whole movie was this back and forth between these, which one was she going to pick, and was she going to realize that she really liked the first guy, and what was happening. And then there was a plot twist, and it wasn't her that broke up with the first guy, it was the first guy that broke up with her. And then, are they going to get back together in the end? And yes, they did. Oh, and I couldn't even leave. I sat there for an hour and 45 minutes watching that show because I couldn't leave, because I needed to know. I needed to know what was the thing. How was I gonna? What was the victory that we were gonna get out of that? And it's the themes that go through the stories, and the stories are real, and the stories mean something to us. And the problem is, we haven't had someone come along that explains to us what the story means. We're attracted to it. We just haven't quite figured out what exactly the story means. And so what he says here is that you can take those stories, and if you can understand the themes of them, you can understand why they're successful. What is it about the Lion King? You know, you got the son, you got the father, and you've got the mean, evil, the other lion, whatever he was, brother-in-law, uncle, whatever he was, that basically took the son down to the pits of hell, and then he had to bring him back up and raise him back up to be the champion again, right? Well, in our lives, if we will pursue those types of activities, that will lead us to those championship things. Pursue what is meaningful. Those other things will let us go. They'll let us down. All of that's what he's talking about there, they'll let us down, right? When we follow your impulses, live for the moment, do what's expedient, lie, cheat, steal, deceive, and manipulate. Yeah, go for the sugar. Don't exercise. Don't get checked and get adjusted. Just take whatever's easiest. What you're going to find out in the end is that's the worst thing you could do. It's not the best. It's not your best option. Your best option is to set yourself on a task, put your eyes on something, and go get it. And if you can stay after that and do that for a lifetime, you're way better off in the long run. Rule number 8. Hang on, I'm getting to it. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. He's really big about this one. You know, he tries to tell the truth every chance that he gets, and sometimes it's not popular to tell the truth. And especially in health and wellness, it's not popular to tell the truth. But the short term of that is that the very best option that you have is to tell the truth. If you lie, you what basically happens inside your brain is you recalibrate reality. When you keep lying to yourself and you keep lying to yourself, then after a while you start to believe the lie, and so you actually recalibrate what you think reality is all about, and that will get you in trouble deep down the road. So you're way better off to just try to tell the truth every chance you get. Rule number 9: assume that the person you're listening to might know something you don't. Yeah, that's a big one right there. A rule that we should be humble to that the intelligence of other people as well. Maybe we could learn something from them. Maybe we're not so high and mighty after all, and maybe there are things that we could learn from someone else. And I think that's a great rule right there. Rule number 10: be precise in your speech. Say exactly what you mean. Like, tell someone what you're trying to say. That's what's hard about this podcast and doing this, and trying to articulate yourself and trying to be able to say exactly what you mean, and be very precise about what you're trying to say. And he's very precise. That's why this Maps of Meaning book is so difficult to read, is because every single sentence has a lot of depth to it, and it really is. There's a lot to it right there. So don't don't um, don't beat around the bush. Just say it. Just be precise. Say what you mean. Be very clear, so that you can mold yourself into. That kind of goes back to that last chapter, but you really want to be able to communicate yourself clearly in the world. You want to stand up with your shoulders back. You want to present yourself to society. You want to say what you mean. You want to also be humble on the last rule and understand that the other person might have something to say as well. It helps us all get along with each other. Rule number 11, I think we're actually going to get through these, is do not bother children when they are skateboarding. Sometimes we helicopter parent. Sometimes it's too much. Like, you got to have. He's basically telling kids that if you're raising kids, what this chapter is kind of all about is, hey, look, kids need to have the room to make mistakes. They need to be able to fall and get up. They need to be able to hurt themselves every once in a while. They need to be able to learn and work themselves through the things that they're working through in life. And sometimes that's part of the lesson itself, is to be able to do that. And then the last one, rule number 12: pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. The gist of that is, hey, look, sometimes we got to stop and smell the roses. Sometimes we got to be able to just take a moment and enjoy the day and enjoy the life. And you gotta enjoy those finer times. You can't make it all serious all the time. So that's it. That's all 12 rules. I wanted to just give you the rules because the depth of these of the book is pretty good. I mean, this is a best-selling book. It's changed a lot of people's lives, and if you want to, you can get into this book. It's called Jordan B. Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. It's a fantastic book, and it's just another one of those books on the list that have taught me something to try to help me be a better person. So I hope it does the same for you. You guys have a great night. We will see you again tomorrow night at 6 on Life with Jason Clemmons, DC.